In country specifically, your Nashville label really matters because country radio is very important. I know people might be listening and be like, radio? I haven't turned on a radio in a long time. But I'll tell you this, in country music, radio is a priority. And it still is. You get played on the radio, you get number ones on the radio, it translates to selling tickets. It's a real thing. Country fans still listen to the radio. Sure, they're on DSPs and they're on Sirius and all that stuff. But radio still is a priority.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business. The book, 3rd edition, out now, wherever you find books, all formats, ebook, audiobook, hardcover, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Simon Tikhman. He is the co-founder of Core Entertainment and now Core Records, which is in partnership with Universal Music Group. Core Entertainment and Simon, they really came on the map as an artist management company, managing Bailey Zimmerman, the country superstar, and Nate Smith, also massive country artist. Bailey, his debut album, Religiously, the album, it was actually the biggest streaming debut across all genres since 2021 and peaked at number 3 on Billboard's top country albums. He sold out his first ever headline tour across North America and Europe. And his single, Where It Ends, achieved 4 consecutive multi-week number ones and simultaneously earned the record as the artist with the most consecutive number ones on the country airplay chart. And Nate Smith, he reached number 43 on Billboard Artist 100. And he's now platinum certified, and he's got a bunch of other accolades. If you don't know Nate Smith or Bailey Zimmerman, you're probably not in the country realm. Now, Nate and Bailey come at music from 2 opposite ends of the industry. Nate Smith didn't actually get his record deal till 36, age 36, I believe. And after grinding it out for many years and almost quitting music, coming back to it, Simon tells his story. And, grinding it out in Nashville, doing the songwriter thing. And he talks about that and how he kind of broke out. And Bailey, from the opposite end of the spectrum, as kind of a younger internet native artist. He's in his early 20s and he kind of broke out on social media, on TikTok specifically, and talks about how they both found their way in music and the differences in how Nashville receives artists that have done it the traditional way and ones that have done it in kind of the newer way, social first. We spend most of the time talking about these 2 artists and also just kind of the industry as it is now, what Nashville is like now, what the whole Nashville country music scene is. We talk about the nuances between Nashville labels and coastal record labels and how all that works. And we dive into artist management, but also what Simon and Core is doing with their new record label and his philosophy behind how you break as a country artist in 2025. Very fascinating, very interesting interview. And we start off by Simon telling his story, so I don't need to break it down for you here. But he is a guy that did not come from the music industry when he founded Core Entertainment. And I'll let him tell the story. But it was interesting because most people that we have on the show, they're in the industry lifelong. Usually sometimes start as artists, or they've just been doing music since the very beginning. And Simon's a little bit different, and he came to the industry a little bit later after doing a few other endeavors. So fascinating to hear it from his standpoint. You can find Core Entertainment and Simon on Instagram at @theCoreEnt, E-N-T, or at Simon Tikhman, that's Tikhman. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram if you'd like to stay in touch. But right now, if you wouldn't mind, just pause this, visit aristake.com, get on the email list. That's how we're getting the best way for us to stay in touch with you. And leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or however you're listening to this. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button, leave us a comment on Spotify. Yes, you can leave comments on Spotify now, or a comment on YouTube, or however you're listening to this. Stay in touch with us. Follow it if you'd like us to continue to show up in your feed. All right, let's kick into the show. Simon Tikhman, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Yeah, so we're here today to talk all about the TV show Nobody Wants This, and I hear that that is why you're on the show today. So no, I'm just kidding. That was a little tagline when I got your bio. I'm like, well, I had just finished the show, and we got the real life incarnation of Adam Brody here, the hot rabbi.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? Just kidding.
Okay. That's why I'm here. Okay. Okay.
That's why you're here. That's the only reason.
I'm here
That's
to
it.
tell you what's true and what's false. It's based
I'm
on
going line by line. I got every scene mapped out right here. I really want to. No, I'm just kidding. But no, and I don't know if you want to. That's yeah. I don't know if you want to mention anything about it.
I mean, what I can mention is that I'm very proud of my wife. She created a incredible show, and people seem to really resonate, and they really
Yeah.
resonate with the character that is loosely based on me, which is great. It's funny because like when she first talked about making it, however many years ago, I was like
Yeah.
kind of hesitant because I'm a private person. But then,
Yeah.
and he's a rabbi and this, and I was like, okay, that's definitely a
Yeah.
much more loose version. So
For sure.
I think I knew it was great, but I didn't realize, and she'll say the same thing for herself. I don't think she realized how big it was going to be and how much
Yeah.
people are going to love it. So I'm very proud of her, proud of her sister, proud of everyone part of it. It's really
Yeah.
taking the
No,
world.
my non-Jewish wife and I really loved watching the show, and she could definitely relate. We both could relate as well, and we're in similar positions, I would imagine, as you and your wife.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of reality. People really, I think, honestly, even if you're not Jewish, and
yeah,
like people really seem to, it hits home, and
yeah,
the realness of it really hits home.
for sure. So anyway, we're not actually here to talk about that today. I think it. But I do want to. So give me your background a little bit, and I'm curious, kind of your journey that led you to artist management and led you to core and kind of the music industry.
Yeah. So I grew up in San Francisco, and I was the first in my family born here in America. My parents they were from the former Soviet Union. My brother was a few months old when they left, and so we grew up in San Francisco. My dad's background was tech,
Mm-hmm.
and in a Eastern European family, education is very important. So schooling and all that was important to us, was important to our parents, and so I went to school in the Bay, and then I got into the entrepreneurship program here at USC in LA, and I moved out here, and I really always was interested in business and
Mm,
starting something from scratch and creating something from nothing. It was just something that really interested me. And then I went to the program here. I actually started a company in college that it wasn't music artists, but it was professional athletes and coaches. It was pre,
mm,
Twitter X days. It was a way to get fans directly in contact with some of their biggest star players. And some of my
mm,
like college USC at the time was like a professional team in
yeah.
terms of its exposure. And some of the players on that team became clients of mine. The coach became a client of mine, Pete Carroll, and then I had some other clients in the NFL, and it was a really interesting. And I remember just the coolest part of it was like we had like full access to the team, and so like
Mm-hmm.
my friends were like my interns, and they were like, working with me, and we
Sick.
were like just kind of putting this thing together, like gluing this thing together as well as we could, and honestly, it was really fun. It wasn't like the most successful company, but it was fun just doing something while I was in school, and I like
Sure.
the nuts and bolts of it. I like the idea. I had an idea. I like working with talent. I think it kind of established in my mind, like, okay, this is the most famous coach right now, but he trusts me in this capacity. So I
Mm,
built up that relationship with him where he's like, okay, Simon, what should we do? And he's, on the field before the biggest game and giving me exclusive content right before
mm-hmm.
and he's never done that before. But I'm like, okay, we're going to film this and we're going to put this out and make exclusive merch and all these things. And this was got to be in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then so it just got I got a bug for starting things. And then, I forayed into different parts of business. I would invest in a lot of different companies, a lot of young entrepreneurs, which I really liked. I liked that part of being able to advise, be on boards, from the start of things. I touched the alcohol world. I work with athletes, with musicians, and not in a managerial sense, but in
Sure.
certain project by project companies.
Okay.
And then the most recent thing that really got me into the music industry was I was working with a music management company, and I started a JV with them where we were just investing in different companies, writing
Like a
checks.
record label with them, or what do you mean by
No, it
JV?
wasn't even on the music side. It was more on the
Oh,
brand side. It was do a tequila brand here
okay.
or an app here or whatever it was, but it was really ancillary businesses
Okay.
outside of the main platform. And when I was there, I really it was like a small shop, and I started getting exposure to the music side of things. And I was
Okay.
really fascinated about it because there's something, I don't know, I always felt excited by it. I just didn't know much about it. And
Yeah.
I was truly, I felt like on the business side, I really, I had real momentum there, but on the music side, I was a novice, and I was trying to learn. I always like to be in rooms with people who are smarter than me, and just be a sponge.
Yeah.
And I started sitting in on meetings that had nothing to do with what I was doing with
Hmm.
an A&R meeting,
Mm-hmm.
um, a meeting about a tour, whatever it was. And I was just interested, even though I wasn't really participating because that wasn't my lane at the time. I was just participating. And then I had a lawyer. I still have a lawyer. His name is Peter Paterno and Joe Carlone. And I was introduced to them. I was working with them, and they were like, "You need to meet this guy, Chief."
Mm-hmm.
Chief's in the music industry in a different kind of. He's a manager, but you guys do business the same way. He's kind of itchy in his situation. You're kind of itchy in your situation. I think you two would just hit it off.
Yeah.
And so he was also represented by, or not represented, but Peter was his lawyer too, and so was Joe. And so we went and had a joke with my wife that it was my best blind date I've ever been on. And he says the same to his, that we went and we just talked life, we talked business, we talked visions of things, and it wasn't just music centric. It was just entrepreneurial because Chief made his bread and butter in the music industry, but also had an appetite for things outside of it too, for investments and for film and TV and things that maybe I was more exposed to, at least being here in LA and him being in Nashville. And so after that, in 2019, him and I sat with Michael Rapino at Live Nation,
Mm-hmm.
and we said, "Michael, we don't know what we're gonna do, but we have an idea of making an entertainment company. I don't know what that entails. Truly, management will be part of it. Investments will be part of it. Film and TV, sports, which I touched, will all be part of it." And to Michael's credit, Michael empowers the entrepreneur. He knows and he also knows that a manager, quote unquote, is the gatekeeper in the industry. And we kind of he said, yeah. He on like in our meeting, he said yes.
How
Whatever
do
you
you
guys
get a
want.
meeting with Michael Rapino, one of the most powerful people in the music industry, when you're not really in the music industry?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I knew him peripherally,
Okay.
and Chief already knew him because Chief was at Big Loud. And
Okay.
so Big Loud management already had a deal with Live Nation. So Chief
Okay.
didn't know him well, but he knew him well enough that we got a 30-minute spot on his calendar. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. But that
Okay.
30 minutes turned into an hour and a half. So we must have
Yeah.
been doing something right. And so he said, yeah. And the truth is, we didn't have any artists, no employees, nothing. It was just Chief and I in a chair and a desk. And we were just like, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And that's the truth. We didn't have this like well written out business plan. It wasn't that. And I've been part of companies that you have a 30-page business plan, and it's, so clear of what the vision is. Our vision was just to use our network, our resume that we've established already, both in the music industry and outside and in business, and create an entertainment company that works with artists, whatever that entails. So that was at the kind of towards the end of 2019. Obviously, early 2020 comes and the pandemic shuts everything down. And Chief and I are just, he's stuck in Vancouver. I'm here in LA. And every day we wake up and we're on phone calls together talking about what we're going to do, if we can do it, when the world opens up.
Yeah.
And every day we started getting antsy, like I think everyone in the world was. And after a few months of the pandemic, we both decided, let's just get on a plane and go to Nashville. Because the rumor was there wasn't much COVID in Nashville.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And
yeah.
I didn't have a kid at the time, and I was newly married. And so I was moving a little bit more freer, I think, than I would now.
Sure.
It was a worldwide pandemic. But so we started going to Nashville, and, Chief knew a lot of people and I knew a few people, and we just started taking meetings. And we were just saying, we're open for business. And we started meeting with writers and artists and publishers, just started taking meetings. And
during that time, what was the introduction? What was your, a proverbial business card? What did it say? Like when you're saying we're taking meetings, you don't really have a company at this point. You have two guys who are like, hey, we had a meeting with Michael Rapino. You should sign with us. Like literally, you have no history in the music industry. He's got some history with Big Loud. I just don't even know what's your opening line to a songwriter in Nashville or an artist or something. Be like, hi, I'm Simon.
Yes. Hi, I'm Simon.
I run Core. What's Core? I don't know.
No, it's a very fair point. Our opening line was, Chief was like, look, I've been doing this a long time. I grew up in the music industry in terms of my career. He was the sound engineer and then tour manager for Nickelback for so long. And then, he discovered Florida Georgia Line, which carries a lot of, credit in Nashville. And then obviously Morgan Wallen, and Big Loud was a big name. And so that for sure got us in rooms in Nashville. And then, I was kind of like, look, I've done many different business ventures, successful, not successful, work with artists, work with athletes, work with, all kind of interesting people that we've invested in. And so we really had this kind of yin yang approach when we were sitting down and having these meetings. And then Chief got a phone call from this really great songwriter, Emily Wiseman. Do you know Emily? She's a big songwriter in Nashville. And she was like, look, I've always loved Chief, but I've never, I've never really worked with Chief, but I love Chief from afar. And I heard you guys started a new thing. What is it? And Emily Wiseman is, she's written songs for Halsey, for BTS, she's bigger than Nashville in terms of her hits, but she also has written some monster hits for country artists. And at the time, she was working on her actual artist project at Warner here in LA with Baysha. And she didn't have management. And it was kind of like a perfect situation in terms of someone who's already established name as a songwriter, but looking to become an artist and then she played us some songs and they were incredible.
Yeah.
And it was like, we're both kind of starting early on together in terms of she was very established as a writer, but not as an artist. And we're not really established as managers, at least not on our own. Chief has his history, and so we worked together and we just kind of just threw ourselves into it. And it was really exciting. And I loved it. I loved getting in there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And although I will say this, although the artist project didn't necessarily work in the way we thought it could or would, because the music was so good, it was some of the most fulfilling work I think she's done and we've done. And we've been doing this company for maybe 5 years and change. And it was just like we had nothing.
Yeah.
And we were just in it. And music videos, trying to make music videos for, $12. And, and the songs that she was sending, she had so many incredible demos. And it was like the first foray into it. And then, Nashville's a small town, and Emily held weight. And once people, heard that we're working with Emily Wise Band, and then, doors started to open, people started to be intrigued. All of a sudden we got a phone call from a friend here in California, was like, I don't know. I know you guys are doing this thing. I have this guy who's been calling me incessantly, trying to play on my festival. And he's the sweetest guy. And his name's Nate Smith. And he's really talented, but I don't know, maybe you guys can meet with him. And, and Nate Smith was, I think at the time he was like 35 years old. And, this is the one genre, maybe there's other genres, but this is the one real genre where you can be 35, you can be 16, you can win Best New Artist. It doesn't matter, right? And so we flew to Nashville to meet with Nate, and Nate had living out of his car. He had $14 to his name. He came to Nashville when he was younger. It didn't work. Moved back to California, where he's from Paradise, California. His, as as a Cali, Paradise burned down. And when Paradise burned down, someone gifted Nate a guitar and said, you got to go try it again. And so he drove back to Nashville, living out of his car. He signed with us. Literally, Nate was like, we put a contract in front of him, and he was like, okay. And I was like, no, you need a lawyer. He's like, where do I sign? I was like, no. I need you to be. And so he signed with us. A few weeks later, we met with Sony, got him a publishing deal. And then all of a sudden things started, the dominoes started falling a little bit. Nate started just writing songs, and, a song started really working online on the DSPs. And then Sony, Randy Goodman from Sony Music calls, and he's like, okay, Nate's ready for his own label deal. And so now Nate's one of the first kind of 360 artists in Nashville, with the pub and the label and all this stuff. And then we just really just kind of planted our flag in Nashville as a company that started in LA, and we still have offices here in LA, and LA is important, but we planted our flag and it was like, this is what we're doing. And during COVID, honestly, we would have events that, like, we would have our intern at the door with a thermometer and mask and all this kind of stuff, making sure no one is sick, and test. And we would come in and we would just have any young artist start performing. And we would just kind of have these like little hangs. And it was like, okay, we're really inundating ourselves into the Nashville culture. And we're like, sure, I know we're outsiders, but this is important to us, and we're here. And Nate would play, and then we would have Colby Calais would play, just because people would come. And all of a sudden, like, we started getting to know that, like, oh no, these guys are here and they're really kind of establishing themselves. And then, word of mouth is everything. It's the best marketing you can have. And then one day someone's like, have you seen this kid on TikTok? This kid, Bailey Zimmerman? And we look and we're like, damn, sounds good. And then all of a sudden you're on a Zoom with Bailey, and Bailey's like, I've been singing for 4 months. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? And then let's get Bailey in it. And then we started growing and hiring the right people. Because when we started this thing, the one thing that Chief and I, when I said we had that blind date, the thing that really drove us to each other is like, we are in the position that we want to only work with people that we like.
Yeah.
Like that we like, and that have the right values, and that care about the right things and do business the right way. Because I do business the right way. Chief does business the right way. And we're not like here to make short money. And it's about like long term. And that's our belief and our value system with the artists that we sign. There's a lot of things I said that from the get-go with the artists that we signed back then in 2020, or the artists we sign now in 25, is the power in no is more important than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, so well, I'm gonna let's talk about Nate a little bit, and Bailey. I mean, I guess the country industry in Nashville in general, because the trajectory. I mean, it seemed to move very quickly and easily, but it doesn't typically happen where an artist or songwriter is like signs a pub deal in Nashville, puts out one song, and becomes a star the next day or whatever, or like it starts taking off and exploding in the like one song on the DSP. Like break it down a little bit more of just like, what was that process like of, and just in the country industry specifically, because I think, country, aside from every other genre in the industry, functions slightly differently. And maybe you can kind of break that down a little bit because, most labels don't really, definitely not majors, don't really sign artists outside of country where there isn't something already happening, where they haven't already built up a massive fan base, there isn't already traction, there isn't millions of streams already. They expect an artist to do that work on their own. Now you got, Nate, a publishing deal. Now that's just for songwriters, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nashville style country publishing writer deals are going to look a little bit differently than a pop music publishing deal. So talk about that a little bit, of how you're able to get him a deal, what that deal kind of looked like, just publishing initially. And then when you're like, oh, he's ready for a label deal, tell me about that process then too a little bit.
Look, you hit it right on the nose. The publishing deals in Nashville are nothing like the pub deals outside in general. Mm-hmm. They are there so you can have the ability to make that your main job, in terms of like enough money there that like pays the rent and gets you food. And that was the goal with Nate. It was one of those things where he had enough good songs and he was so good live. Like, we had him play in front of Rusty Gaston and Anna Wiseman, Emily's sister, at Sony, and he sounds like the record. And he was just so good live, and the songs that he wrote were, impressive enough that they were like, okay, this kid has some talent. Let's get him in. It wasn't some grandiose deal where Nate's buying a mansion. This was like, so Nate could pay rent. Sure. And that was, in a lot of ways, and I talk about being like, not short-sighted, but that was kind of a short-sighted thing in terms of, this is a good stopgap just to get to the next step, right? We just need a pub deal so Nate can live and start writing 4, 5, 6 times a week, whatever he wants. But that was the goal. And our goal in when he got the pub deal was just so you don't have to focus on anything besides the music. That really is, and we still do that with a lot of our young artists. It's like, if you are talented enough, and we work, with Warner a lot, and Warner Chappell, is they trust us now at this point that if we see some talent in a young kid or young female, and we said, she or he, they're great writers. These are their songs, 3, 4, 10, 50, doesn't matter what the number is, but there's some talent there, and they just need to be in the right rooms with the right writers, the right producers, and they can get that through you guys. They trust us. So with Nate, it's never like, okay, we're going to get a pub deal and then we're going to get a label deal. No, it was like one step at a time. Let's get a pub deal and let them. And then it was like, go show them that you can improve your writing. Go show them you can improve your songs, And so he started just working his tail off, and people notice, the publishers notice, other artists who get in the room with you, even if you're not writing a song for yourself or people notice. It's a small town, people start talking, and we didn't push any of it. It wasn't, I always say to artists, like, when we have to get something that, like, we ask for a favor or we need, that usually doesn't end well. The incoming business is the more organic one, where someone picks up the phone and calls me like, tell me about Nate Smith. You know what I mean? Where, at this point, there's so many people in the music industry that they can call and be like, I need a favor. I need you to do so-and-so. Sure. But that usually doesn't pan out. You want it to be organic and that the people want it. And so when Rusty called us and he's like, okay, Mark, Randy Goodman at Sony is ready, to meet with Nate. It was a big deal because it took time. It wasn't an overnight thing. Nate was 36 at the time, and it was a huge deal for us because, his manager was like, okay, we did it the right way. We didn't force him down anyone's throat. He had some really good songs that were popping up.
Right. So the good song, were they his song? Were they songs for him as an artist, or were they songs written for other
him
artists?
As an artist.
Okay.
Him as an artist. Nate was always an artist.
Okay.
Like, you could just, when you heard him with just him and a guitar, acoustic, it was just so clear that Nate was an artist and that Nate wrote, he's, as a 35, 36-year-old at the time, Nate really lived life. He had a lot
Yeah.
of experiences, and he wrote songs about his own life and tragedy and love and
Yeah.
loss and all that. And it was just so clear. We never thought of Nate as a writer. I mean, for someone else.
Sure.
And it was clear to others that Nate was an artist through and through. And then, it started happening, and Nate just, from living in his car with $14 to having the longest running number one in country radio history,
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a quite a journey and trajectory. I'm curious. So, what was he kind of doing before he met you guys? You said living in his
He
car
was a
for for
nurse.
some,
He was a nurse. He came back
oh, okay,
home to California and he was a nurse and he loved it. He was, Nate is a beautiful, beautiful soul. Like he
yeah,
was genuinely like that was going to be his life. He was going to have this talent and he said he tried it and it didn't work in Nashville when he was in his early 20s. And he was going to be a registered nurse and that's what he was
hmm,
doing. And then I don't want to, mangle the story, but someone gave him a guitar. I don't know. I don't remember if it was a friend or his brother,
yeah,
and was like, when his home burnt down that he was living in with his dad in Paradise. It's like, you got to give it one more go. And he got on his
wow,
guitar and he
wow,
went.
that was the
And that's
sign
like,
he needed. Yeah,
and when you talk about Nashville being different, those are the
yeah,
stories Nashville loves. Nashville loves, it's called a 10-year town for a reason, but Nashville loves a comeback story. Nashville
yeah,
loves a kid like Nate who came and kind of fell flat, left, and then came back and was like, no, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And now,
cool.
we talk to Nate 1,000 times a day, and Nate still, to his credit, really appreciates the wins. I think when you have enough wins, it
Yeah,
becomes normal
yeah,
and just like. But Nate is a guy who really sits in it, and we really preach that, Chief and I, to our artists: sit in and enjoy it, because then it's just like, what are you doing it for if you're just
yeah.
expecting it all the time? And you can't enjoy this number one or this sold out tour or this song, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, he really paid his dues, and he had so many years of not quote unquote making it, of just like grinding it out, and tr- trying to do the music industry thing, and it just not falling into place for so many years. And so that's you have that experience, you have all of those failures, and that's when you can really appreciate when you do get the wins and the real wins
It's
later
so
on.
true. It's so true. And I'm sure every manager or everyone preaches to their artists too, but it's hard.
Yeah,
I can see it being so hard from the artist perspective. Honestly, it's not even music. It's bigger than that. People,
yeah.
when you're all of a sudden on this big winning streak, like not every win feels as big, right? Like it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, of course that happened. Like, because
Yeah.
that happened. And I think sometimes when you're on this winning streak and then when something doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go,
Right.
those are harder to really, you're sitting in those longer,
Sure.
or you read an article or a comment that you didn't like. Those things stick harder with these artists. And we preach like mental health is so important,
Yep.
it's important for everyone, but we as a company, for our employees and our artists, like this is more important than anything. Like what's
Yeah.
going on between the ears and all that stuff, all the accolades, all the work, that stuff is so secondary and tertiary. Let's get you feeling happy,
Yeah.
enjoying all the things so you can really take it all in and be the best you can. So we
Yeah.
definitely push that on our artists to take that time.
So, yeah, no, that's great. And and now at the kind of the other end of the spectrum, you have this other artist, Bailey Zimmerman,
Yep.
who's in his early 20s, and you said hadn't really even picked up a guitar or started singing whatever 4 months prior or something like that. It wasn't even a musician. You have this one artist who'd grinded it out for the majority of his life, and like really went through it,
Yeah.
and was doing the hustle, and was like, cutting his teeth in the Nashville scene and playing the open mics and doing the songwriter rounds and making the rounds and all the thing that you do in Nashville if you're, working to be a songwriter, an artist, or in the industry. And now you have this kid who who's good at the internet.
Mhm.
Talk to me about like how he was received or just kind of like what that trajectory and experience is like? Because I would imagine there might be some people in the traditional, like you said, Nashville's a small town. It is a very conservative town when it comes to kind of the industry, and like it's traditional, and it's very much tied to its legacy and its traditions and its community and its culture. And so when you have, I would, maybe what one could look at as an outsider or somebody who just kind of pops onto the scene because he's good at the internet. Tell me how that went and how that was received, and just like that journey of this young kid who's good at the internet and wants to be a country artist, and how that works in Nashville.
Look, I think Bailey was the face of the new world order, right?
Okay.
He's the face of how music is now, and in very different ways. You don't have to have the struggle that a lot of artists do. You don't. I mean, he struggled in a different way. I mean, but the thing about Bailey is Bailey was working since he was 16 years old. He was working pipeline, and he had that work ethic in him. The fact that he was a little bit later in terms of finding out that, dang, I can sing a little bit and I like this music thing.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that Nashville, and maybe bigger than Nashville, people don't love a quote unquote overnight success, right? I think that's just kind of human nature, because people are like, I've been doing this for so long, and
Right.
And this kid comes in. But like what Bailey had that I think really stood out, because over COVID there was hundreds of artists signed based off of whatever algorithms they were hitting on TikTok.
Yes.
What Bailey had different than a lot of those artists is Bailey had real work ethic, and Bailey knew what he didn't know, and he wanted to learn it. Bailey wasn't one of those kids who came in and was like, I know everything. I'm here, and like I'm here, and I want to, you don't need to teach me anything. Bailey came in and was like, look, very self-aware. I'm new to this. I just started this thing, but like this thing started going viral, and this first song that I did, Never Coming Home, is working. And like, I don't know anything about anything. I don't know what a record label is. I don't know what, what I mean? I joked that Chief and I were on a Zoom with him, and I was like, okay, well, this is Chief. I'm Simon. I'm here in LA. Chief is here. Chief's the mayor of Nashville. And he's like, and we just, and then a few months later, he's like, I didn't want to say this, but when you said Chief was the mayor of Nashville, I thought he was the actual mayor. And I was like, no, I didn't mean that, Bailey. I meant he's the mayor of Nashville. Like, he's a very well-respected man in town, and he's been doing it and all this kind of stuff. And so Bailey came in like wide-eyed, ready to work, ready to figure it out. And look, that turns a lot of people off, right? Where you come from TikTok and you're not, you know what I mean? You're not playing your rounds on Broadway. But once you got to know Bailey and you met Bailey, and he won you over with his charm, and he won you over with like, interest, tell me, how does this work? And there was no like, he wasn't like trying to big ego anyone. He was like, I don't understand. I have Simon and Chief. I don't understand. Explain to me like you've never explained the music industry to anyone else. I need to understand. And we definitely had some obstacles, and that was clear. But what Bailey has, Bailey worked really, really hard, and he started making great songs, and it was undeniable. At the end of the day, like, Fall in Love is a great song. It doesn't matter, Bailey releasing Fall in Love, and I'm not going to lie to you and say we thought it was going to go as big as it did. No chance. You can't predict that, Ari. Like, you can't predict anything. We think it's a great song. Did I think it was going to go number one at radio and do all these numbers on DSPs? No, we just thought it was a really strong song from a newcomer. And people, what he started doing is like, we would start bring them to the live show, or Bailey's doing just like a little round or whatever he is, with a guitarist, and like just hear him live, get to know him. And he started winning the people that really didn't want it. He started winning them over. And Bailey is, when you're in conversation with Bailey, Bailey is paying attention. Bailey is interested. When a radio programmer comes, that guy knows that Bailey wants to know where he's from, where she's from, what town, how they grew up. And like all of a sudden, his personality started coming out, and people were like, instead of cheering against him, they're like, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
He's like young, and he really respected the people who came before him. He respected the artists, and we started seeing the turn. But
Yeah.
you said Nashville is different. Nashville
Yeah.
doesn't like overnight success. Nashville doesn't like a manager from California or from Vancouver.
Yeah.
So we were kind of working uphill a little bit. But now you see, however many years later, you see Bailey, announce a tour last week, and it, sells out. Like,
Right.
people love Bailey, and he's only released one album.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of the the TikTok phenomenon of COVID, where every major label was just signing whatever flash in the pan viral moment was happening. He was pretty active then, and he was building up his audience, and like you said, he released the song and it's kind of started to take off. Was that Never Coming Home? Was that like he released that independently? Was that his kind of earliest first thing?
Yeah.
Were you guys working together still at the time, or did you come to the table after he had already started doing the music thing, and then you helped get the team together and grow from there?
Well, honestly, he was doing the music thing for like a couple weeks when we got there.
Wow.
When we got connected, it was
Yeah.
very, very early on. It was just going, he had TikToks. He was a known face in this world that now I'm very well aware of, but I didn't know back then, is like the truck scene. There's a real big truck scene.
Sure.
And he's from a small town in Illinois, and he was kind of like this young kid, the soup up trucks and all this kind of stuff. And he was kind of like, he had this personality, like, I'm Bailey Zimmerman. And he's like talking to the camera, and it was a real thing. So he had a built-in following for that. And it's funny because people always say that if people come to your pages for one thing and then you try to show them something else, they're not really interested. They're only here for one thing. But clearly,
right,
he showed, a couple of singing songs.
Well, the Venn diagram of trucks and country music, I mean, there's a pretty wide middle there.
Very true. Very true. And so we started working with him early on. And Bailey was the example of someone who was hitting the algorithms, right? Like, the major started seeing it. And, there was a real bidding war for Bailey between some of the majors.
Sure.
And that was after we were on board. And it's so funny because the truth is, when we signed Bailey, we said to him, it's going to be great, but we're going to like just develop you for at least a year, maybe 2 years. And then, no joke, a month or 2 months later, just the phone is starting to ring, and back to the incoming business. And you're like, wait, who's online? The head of what label? The head of this label? And you're like, we just, and back then, when during COVID, everyone's just looking at what's working on socials, and the algorithm is, popping off. And Bailey was hitting the algorithm. And in our timeline of developing him for a year or two went out the window, because it just was an obvious thing. Like, we could still develop you, but with the right partners. And Bailey was one of the first artists that got a Nashville label and a coastal label to partner up. And
what does that mean, Nashville label and a coastal label?
So Warner Nashville signed Bailey, and they partnered with Elektra, which is now Atlantic. So we had the Nashville component, which was amazing, still amazing. And then we had Elektra in New York and LA. So
tell me what the benefit of that is, or why, because one would think if you have a major label like a Warner, and I don't know how many people necessarily understand the distinction between like Warner Nashville or Warner LA or Warner New York or Warner UK or just whatever.
Yeah.
Tell me the distinctions between all this. Now we're getting a little bit into the weeds here, but I think it's important to understand what that means, the benefits to that, how that happens, what that even means, because didn't you just sign one record contract? Are you doing 2 record deals? Is that are they conflicting with each other? How does that work in the business sense?
Well, look, in the business sense, in country specifically, your Nashville label really matters, because country radio is very important. I know people might be listening and be like, radio? I haven't turned on a radio in a long time. But I'll tell you this, in country music, radio is a priority, and it still is. you get played on the radio, you get number ones on the radio, it translates to selling tickets. It's a real thing. Country fans still listen to the radio. Sure, they're on DSPs and they're on Sirius and all that stuff, but radio still is priority. And these Nashville labels have incredible radio teams that have the relationships and are, and so that is, very important. And nowadays you see a lot of country artists or, that are signing with, Nashville and Coastal, because Coastal has different, they bring a different set of skills than a Nashville label. So the partnership was really good because, Warner's worried about the Nashville stuff and the country stuff. And that's like their bread and butter, from the Country Music Awards to getting played at radio to all the things that Nashville and the country genre cares about. That is 1A. But then a label like Elektra, now we're with Atlantic, but comes in and they're like, Bailey's global. Like, this is a global artist. And all of a sudden, the spider web is going way further than outside Nashville, right? You establish yourself in Nashville first, and then you start, like, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, this song, Fall in Love, is playing in the UK. And Elektra is seeing, their stats guys are seeing, like, what's going on over there. And it's like, oh, wait, maybe we can play some, small club shows in the UK and Ireland if we're seeing the listeners over there. And all of a sudden you're thinking much bigger than just, and not every artist is like that, to be clear. Not every artist cares about that. A lot of artists are like, I am country through and through, and that's what I'm doing. But Bailey is at the time, a 21-year-old, 22-year-old who grew up listening to country, to hip hop, to Jonas Brothers, to, you know what I mean? Like, all of it. And so, like, in his mind, country is what he sings, but, like, he has bigger aspirations in terms of his, musicality. And
so sorry, not to cut you off. Go ahead.
Go.
I was just wondering, so what are they doing? What is the, a Coastal label? What is Atlantic now doing? What was Elektra doing specifically when you say, like, he wants to go global? What does that mean?
I think the truth is, I think the skill set of a Coastal label, and, we can get into it later, and I work with now we have our own label now, is the digital side is huge.
Oh, okay.
I think the digital teams that you see on Atlantic are unbelievable. I mean, we just started, working with them now, and, the vision, it feels massive. It feels like what Bailey cares about, and Bailey cares about being global. And I can speak for that. When we have these meetings, Bailey's like, I want, he wants his music to be played everywhere. He wants to be able to, play live music everywhere. He wants to travel. He's already traveled around the world and played shows in London, and he's played shows in all over Canada. And this is big. And I think the Coastal labels come in and they're like, okay, let's focus on, playlisting and DSPs, and not just being on the country playlist, but let's say, and all of a sudden, because of that, we get a phone call that the Jonas Brothers want Bailey on a song. And, like, Bailey gets very excited about that, or we get a call from one of the producers of Fast and Furious, and we're like, we want Bailey on a song with Young Boy, and it's going to be end credits for like, these are opportunities that are brought. Sure, they're brought to Bailey because Bailey's, an incredible artist, but they're also brought because we are in partnership with the right people who are, putting Bailey in, the right zeitgeist and the right conversations. Like, there's a lot of people. I'm in LA. I would say, in a surprising way, maybe you disagree with me, but I still think that there's a lot of people in LA who don't know who Morgan Wallen is.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
And Morgan Wallen is, I mean, almost as massive as Taylor Swift in America. Maybe now he played Hyde Park, so maybe even bigger. And there's people who still, I'm sure they know his music, but they don't know who Morgan Wallen is. And that's kind of like the thing. Like, I can't tell you how many.
I'm smiling because, like, the headlines, like, some of my peers heard about Morgan Wallen when he threw a chair off a balcony on Broadway at the bar, and they're like, who is this guy? I never heard of him. And he threw this chair off what was this asshole? And I was like, dude.
Yeah, like, who's Morgan Wallen?
Right. I was like, whoa. But no, you're right. I mean, people, that are not in country necessarily, or in, music, the like in the industry, but also just like that are just not in that. I mean, it's interesting as a society now. I mean, yes, we still have the global superstars, and we have that, but we are also siloed in that respect. And I think especially with country, as massive as a genre it is, it's still siloed, and there aren't there isn't as much crossover necessarily with pop, I guess just the general population and the people in country, like the fans and the audience and the listenership is massive, but it is somewhat insular, just like you're talking Nashville and all of that. Yeah.
It is. It's different now. I mean, it's so different now than it was, decades ago, or even
Sure.
5 years ago when we jumped into the genre. But
Yeah.
it is different. I mean, look at Post Malone. All right,
Yep.
come to
A lot of
Stagecoach.
crossover.
You will see. Come to Stagecoach. I mean, the crossover is crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
I managed Nickelback too with Chief. We had Nickelback play Stagecoach last year, right? And it was the
Wow.
biggest crowd of the weekend.
Yeah.
So it's it's different. It's opening. If you're.
I mean, you had a lap steel to any of those Nickelback songs, and boom, it's on country radio. I mean, there's just like it works. It works really well.
Let's see if Beyonce wins some Grammys for her country, right? Which was a phenomenal album. So it's different now. And so I think when we talk about these coastal labels, it's like Bailey Zimmerman, you might have heard religiously in passing, or you might have heard, Rock in a Hard Place. But what these coastal labels do is like, I want to put a face to that song. I want you to know Bailey Zimmerman. I want you to get, and that's the difference is like, and it helps ultimately sell these tickets for these young fans to come see Bailey. And I think it goes to show that a lot of these artists now that you're seeing being signed are signed to both a Nashville label and a coastal label. It is common now.
Yeah, that's so interesting and fascinating. And I hadn't really heard it put that way or really understood, because it's one of kind of I would say one of our blind spots of this show. Of the 180 some episodes, I think we've had maybe 3 people in the country industry, you being one, on the show, and that's a failure of ours, which is why I was excited to chat with you about this today, because it is like a totally different industry. And and I'm familiar with people that sign like Warner UK or like Parlophone or like a record label in the UK, and they're like, oh, we're going to partner with a subsidiary label in the US, and so you have a European label, you have a US label. But it's so interesting that still within the US you have a Nashville label and a coastal label, which I hadn't really heard of that way before. That's really interesting.
Honestly, I think it's going to be rare now for someone who has something bubbling, for them to sign just a Nashville deal. I think you'll see it. And that's, last year when, Sir Lucian called us and was like, it was a great phone call to receive. Was like, I think you guys are,
Lucian Grange.
Lucian Grange.
The CEO of UMG.
Called and was like, I think I've seen what you guys have built on the management side. I think it's time for you guys, because label was always part of what we wanted to do, but it wasn't necessarily like today. But then when, someone like that calls, the same way when people call Bailey, you take your plan and you rip it up and you're like, okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
And when he called and was like, I think you guys got to I wanted you guys to do your label, and, I'm going to back you and be your partner in it. It was a no-brainer. And the only thing that we told him that really mattered to us was that we don't want to be just a country label. We want to be in all genre. Our deal is, with Universal. It's not with Universal Nashville, it's with Universal. So, when we team up with labels within the Universal family to launch artists, and we're technically the Nashville label if it's a country artist, and we find a Capitol Records or a Def Jam or someone and so that new, it's a brand new business, and that part's been really fun and exciting to find new artists on that side of things as opposed to just the management side.
Does it present a conflict of interest? Because, I mean, you have Nate Smith, who's with Sony, you have Bailey Zimmerman, who's with Warner, and now you are struck a partnership with the third major, with Universal, doing your own record label.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because, we're managing Bailey and we're managing Nate, and we have an incredible team around both of them, around our other artists that we manage. And so, look, there's no conflict. Bailey and Nate will tell you there's no conflict there. I mean, we're signing artists to label that are very different than those two.
Okay.
And it's not like look, there's always going to be competition. Competition is great. I think
Yeah.
I live for competition. I think it's good. It's healthy competition at least. And no, it's a different muscle that we're using for this side of the business than we are for, the Bailey and Nate side of the business.
Gotcha. So I'm curious, speak to country artists out there, younger country artists maybe who are listening to this right now. Are we in has the paradigm shifted? Are we in a new realm, a new industry where, like you said, Bailey is kind of the face of this new paradigm of where you kind of can break on the internet, even in country? What is your recommendation for country artists if they want to have a career, like Nate or Bailey? And would you say you got to be in Nashville, grind it out on the scene, do the Broadway thing, do the 6 cover gigs a week kind of deal, and then play the open mics and shake hands and meet people and do the rounds and write as many songs in as many sessions as you can, try to get a pub deal, then maybe you'll get a record deal, the traditional Nashville model? Or would you work your internet game, figure out how to crack that internet and find your audience online, build it on your own, more of what they're, advising in the pop world of what you're supposed to do as an aspiring pop artist? I'm curious, or maybe something totally different or a combination. What's your advice to aspiring country artists?
It's a great question, because the truth is, and I'm not trying to be politically correct, there's no exact blueprint, right?
Mm-hmm,
like Nate and Bailey are 2 great examples of guys who did it very differently. Although,
yes.
Nate is very good on socials, and he's very active on TikTok. He's not one of those throwback artists that isn't on, doesn't have any footprint there.
Right.
But I think, look, socials and digital, no matter what you do, no matter if you're in Nashville and doing the rounds, is still very important.
Yeah.
It is the reason why we have an incredible digital team in our company that have weekly, I call them report cards, but whatever you want to call them, that they send to our artists of how many posts you make, what works, what's not working, trends, things like that. That is important if you're Nickelback and you're a legacy heritage act, or if you're Bailey Zimmerman and your fans are between 15 and 25 years old. I think that's something that's going to matter. It is the new normal, no matter what kind of artist you are. Out of sight, out of mind. And that's why there's a lot of pressure on these artists. Right? I feel it. Like you have a viral moment and you're constantly waiting for your next viral moment.
Right.
And we say that it's not necessarily about kind of having a viral moment. Those things are very fleeting, but it's about consistency. Your fans, we have these young artists, and we just released her first song on the label, Hannah McFarlane. And what she's so good at online is that you really get to know her. You feel like you know her personality. She is funny. She's a little outrageous. She's, she has a kind of a dry sense of humor. And then her songs are these incredible heartbreak songs. She has all these different facets to her personality, and she's able to show that on social. And she doesn't have much music out there, but all of a sudden Tucker Wetmore, another artist, calls and asks her to go on tour, and she's on tour with very little music out there, but because they're seeing what she's doing on socials. So she's still doing the rounds. She's still playing at Losers in Nashville. She's doing the things she has to do, but social is driving kind of that interest. And all of a sudden she's on this 2025 artist to watch list and that one and all that. And with very little music, but because she's doing socials the right way. So for young artists, there's no rhyme or reason. There's sometimes it's a video is going to go viral. Sometimes you're going to put up a song 100 times and 99 of them you'll get no views. And then the 100th time you'll get 100,000. And all of a sudden it's going to go. And so I think the hardest thing and what we preach is just be consistent and don't be too precious. You can't be too precious with your music. You can't be too precious with your socials. This is a new world. Consumption. I mean, we talked open about streaming, right? And Netflix. People are used to new show here, new song here, new album, and you have to keep up. It's just what the industry has become. and it is a lot of pressure. And that's why we have to really talk to our artists, like, are you ready for this? Because this is like, because when this dam breaks, it goes, and you have to be ready. And so if a young artist comes, I say, look, what I'll tell, keep putting on socials, bring your guitar, don't make it a beautiful video, put it in front of you, show them your skill set, play some songs, play some covers, play some originals, and then start working. And then get in the right rooms for the right artists, right songwriters, and just put yourself out there. Be social, because you just never know when your next break is. People talk about Sabrina Carpenter like she's an overnight success. Sometimes I'm like, she's been around for a long time.
10 albums, right?
10 albums on I don't know how many Taylor Swift tours. And all of a sudden, like, it all comes and it's like the perfect storm. And now she's the biggest, pop star in the world, right? So just keep your head down, keep working, and naysay the haters. Don't listen to the haters. That's my biggest advice. Don't look at the comments.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now, was that, I mean, when you started working with Nate, had he already been on, did he understand the socials? I mean, as like you said, as a 35-year-old, and was he doing the TikTok thing then?
He was doing the TikTok thing.
Okay.
It was, Nate's got a big personality too, in a different way. Nate's kind of like, he's a different person on stage than he is in real life. He's just a nice, boy next door type of guy. And he's funny, and he has a kind of like a good sense of humor. And he really like portrayed that. But he's, and he was doing it on his own. And like, Nate was one of those guys that, like, one of the artists that I didn't actually have to push on socials. Chief and I were like, you keep doing what you're doing.
Wow.
Just because he feels like a throwback and he sings these like big ballads that will crush you, he knew how to use TikTok the right way, and he still does. So I think and we've had artists that have really struggled with socials, and it's tough for them. It's like they don't want to do it.
Right.
Or when they do it, they get really upset when something doesn't go the way they want it to go. And that's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. And, there are artists, I'm sure you have examples of artists that can be big and their socials aren't necessarily the craziest thing and they're not constantly on it. But that feels more like an anomaly these days. It feels like socials are a thing that, like, your song's got to be just as good as your socials.
I mean, right. And every artist, just like I did, collectively just rolled their eyes because it's so frustrating that is the reality for a lot of artists that are just like, brilliant songwriters, brilliant performers, brilliant musicians, cannot figure the internet out, are not good at the short form video thing, and cannot break through. I mean, I see that, and it literally breaks my heart. Like it's devastating to me when I see these brilliant artists that just cannot crack through. I mean, how do you work with those artists? Like you said, some of these artists are, struggling with the internet. I'm sure, similarly brilliant artists that just cannot crack through. How do you work with them? What do you say to them? How do you encourage them? How do you help them through this process when this seems to be the only way, at least to reach that kind of audience for the career trajectory that they're hoping for?
Well, it's hard sometimes to have these conversations, but look, when we sign new artists, we don't sign based off of algorithms or based off of socials. We sign based off of talent. We really do, and we pride ourselves. Like, Nate and Bailey, like, the talent was there. It could have been raw for Bailey, and we have this kid Josh Ross, and we have this band Valley that we love, and we have many other artists that we like take pride in, and not all of them had stuff going on. Most of them didn't. I say socials are secondary to the talent, and I'm like you. It is heartbreaking when you see an artist and you're like, how are you not playing in front of a sold out forum? Like, you're that. I mean, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense because your socials don't translate, or because you just like are a recluse, and it's hard. That is a hard pill to swallow in the music industry, and I can really understand and empathize with that. But sometimes it's like, let's find a different path. If you tell me today you will not do socials, let's figure it out. Maybe you're your favorite artist, and we get you on a tour, and you just start playing, And there's other ways to capture and get new fan engagement.
Yeah.
It's just hard.
Yeah.
It's a harder mountain to climb than if you're good at socials. And it's just we'll see what happens on Sunday or whenever TikTok's potentially going to go.
Well, by the time this airs, we'll know one way or another what's going on. Maybe Red Note is that's the thing. Everyone's going to be on the Chinese Communist Party app, Red Note, by that point. So, right.
You're right. I mean, these are tough conversations to have with artists who don't want to adapt. And it's like, look, are we Blockbuster? Or are we Netflix? Like, it's just it's the way the world has gone. And are we going to? Are we going to? The times are different now, so it's not easy, but it's one of those things that you have to help, and that you surround them. Look, we have a content room in the office. We have incredible group of digital creators, and we're like, look, you might not like it, but go live in the office. Go spend a day, 2 days a week in the office with our team, and maybe they'll help create content, and you can we'll can it for months. Go sit there, and they'll come up with the skits, or they'll come up with, you playing the guitar and what songs to cover and all that stuff. We try to make it as easy as possible, especially for the ones who can't or don't want to do it on their own. But there's artists like Bailey is like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
You know what? That's clear. Dude. Right. You do got this. Right. For sure.
Yeah, we're not Simon, play.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for all of the insight. Very cool stuff that you're doing, and congrats on all the wins with all your artists and all the deals that you're making. And I feel 2025 will be a big year for you guys, and it's cool to see.
That's really nice of you, Ari. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
I don't know if I made it yet. I can get into some rooms, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
But
what does making it mean to you?
Making it is leaving a legacy.
Okay.
So, we talked about Sir Lucian or Michael Rapino, the fact that I can be in a room with them and listen to some stories, some war stories. Honestly, I don't like to only hear about successes. I like to hear about failures and be a sponge and learn. Like, that to me feels like I've made it to a certain degree. But to really make it is when someone sits and wants to hear my successes and my failures one day down the line. Then that means I made it, but not yet.
All right. Simon, thanks so much. That was great.
All right. Thank you, man.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.